Hello, everybody. My name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today, we're going to be diving into the Gospel Coalition posting some cringe on their own website. So, nothing new under the sun, but we're going to be talking about the issue of pro-life activism, specifically with Rebecca McLaughlin, and how she sucks at being a pro-life activist. So, we're going to dive into her latest crap article on the issue of abortion. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. But first, I do want to give a shout out. There was this very important march over the weekend, and that is the Defeat the Mandates march. That was a very important march, and I just want to celebrate everyone who went there. I just want to applaud their efforts, the tens of thousands that showed up to that. Thank you. I did not go, but I thank people that did go. That being said, let's shift gears to the Gospel Coalition. Rebecca McLaughlin wrote this article called "To End the Killing of Babies, We Need a Loving Revolution." I mean, that sounds true, but we'll get to what the point she's really trying to make in this article is, and that point is, feminism. It's basically how feminism tries to hitch its wagon to the pro-life movement and ultimately supplant it or subvert it. So that's what we're going to be diving into in this video. But first, a little background on who Rebecca McLaughlin is. Now, she is one of their she is one of their same-sex attracted Christians over at the Gospel Coalition. So she's basically, I want to say she's a less woke Jackie Hill Perry. That's probably one of the best ways to describe her, but, again, incredibly woke. And we're going to read this article that's just completely, some of the points she makes is completely asinine. And this is the worst pro-life article I've read in some time. So that's why I wanted to talk about this article that was published on January 21st, 2022. So the first section of this article talks about how killing or infanticide was used for eugenics, particularly to devalue women, because you'd kill a girl, you'd keep a son. And it talks about, the Chinese and the Indians, they kill girls and keep boys and stuff like that. So that's the first section of this entire article. Nothing new, nothing profound in that article, but this is where she tries to make her points, because again, this is pro-life feminism, which is really just feminism. So right after Jesus preached against divorce, a practice that left women and children abandoned, people tried to bring their little children to him for his blessing. Luke says that they were bringing even infants. Jesus' disciples turned them away, but Jesus rebuked them. So, she uses that story to explain, we don't feel the shock of his words and action, but his first hearers did. Paul Alford, a non-Christian professor of pediatrics at the University of Pennsylvania, calls Christianity the single greatest breakthrough against child abuse in history. He explains, at the time of Jesus' life, child abuse, as noted by one historian, was a crying vice of the Roman Empire. Infanticide was common, abandonment was common, children were property, no different than slaves, but Jesus stood up for children, cared about them, when those around him typically didn't. Taking their cues from Jesus, the early Christians collected babies abandoned by others, and when, to everyone's surprise, the Roman Emperor Constantine became a Christian, legal protection for women and children started to come into place. Now, I'm going to let her finish, but we need to tackle that line there. The Roman Emperor Constantine became a Christian. We're going to tackle that. But I'm going to let her finish. But put a pin in that one. Historical inaccuracy for $1,000, Alex. So tackling poverty, and so this is where she's using Constantine. In the early 4th century, Constantine passed laws protecting women from unwarranted divorce and offering provisions for children born into poverty. If any parent should report that he has offspring which on account of poverty he is not able to rear, there shall be no delay in issuing food and clothing. Historian John Dickens notes that Constantine used churches as the welfare distribution centers for this program. Killing an infant became a form of homicide in AD 374 under a subsequent Christian emperor. Now, I'm going to pause right there. I'm not sure what Christian emperor that is, but the point she's going to make is that the earlier stuff was actually pro-life and not the latter. In our culture, pro-lifers are often accused of not caring about vulnerable mothers and children after birth, but the first Christian-motivated pro-life legislation in the world followed laws protecting women from abandonment and providing for poor families. Consistent Christian ethics must do all these things. So this is pro-life feminism. And what is pro-life feminism? Pro-life feminism is basically when you use feminism to kind of use the pro-life cause to extort society into giving women more resources that they aren't really entitled to. No one's entitled to resources not to commit a violation against God's law. I do not have to give someone money so that they do not murder their own child. That's not how God's law works. You have a duty not to kill your own child, regardless of whether or not I support your child for you or not. So that is one issue right there. So another entire issue is that she's using Constantine as a Christian example, and that is historically inaccurate. I'm, a bit of a history buff. I spend my 4 o'clocks watching history documentaries. And one thing that's true, the Battle of Milvian Bridge, I believe is the famous battle that involved Constantine in that Roman Civil War, involved him supposedly seeing a vision and having his soldiers paint that symbol on their shields. I don't believe it was necessarily a cross either. However, there was no actual evidence that Constantine became a Christian. This guy was not baptized until he was either dead or right as he was dying. So that is evidence that he was not a Christian, because what Christian would refuse baptism up until the moment they're either dead or post-mortem baptisms, which I believe were a practice at that time. But in any case, from what I've heard it described, that Constantine was Christianity's first corporate sponsor. Constantine was Christianity's first corporate sponsor. There is no evidence that he was actually regenerate. And moreover, it is also historically true that Constantine's contribution to the church and church history is actually overstated. Like his involvement in the canonization of scripture, overstated. His involvement in other things in church history, overstated. It is true that he did mark a turning point in Roman history's relationship with Christianity. That is true. But as far as his contributions to the church and church history goes, those are overstated. So, and her entire article here is premised on Constantine being a Christian role model, which he is not. He's not a Christian role model. It's no coincidence that Matthew and Mark, Jesus' teaching on marriage and welcoming children is followed by his instruction to the rich man to sell all he has and give it to the poor. Today, as a first century symbolic factors put baby, or today as first century, symbiotic factors put babies at risk: poverty and fatherlessness. I'm gonna have to disagree with that also, because again, the rate of poverty has very little to do with the abortion rate in the country. And I'll talk about that after I let her finish. In the United States in 2018, 85% of women seeking abortions were unmarried, and about 3/4 were living below or not far above the federal poverty line. Due largely to historical inequalities, this means black babies are more than 3 times as likely to be aborted than white babies. Hold on there. Hold on there. She's blaming poverty for why black people commit abortion at higher rates than white people? No, that is entirely incorrect. Margaret Sanger founded Planned Parenthood with the specific goal in exterminating black people. Margaret Sanger was a complete white supremacist who wanted to kill black people. And if you look at Planned Parenthoods, where are they located? They target black neighborhoods. And it's not like a supply and demand, or it's not like demand begets supply. When it comes to abortion, supply begets demand. When it comes to sin, supply begets demand. We have sinful desires, but the external temptation of an abortion factory in your neighborhood increases the temptation of someone to murder their own child. That's how abortion works. If you have fewer abortion factories, you have a lower abortion rate. That is the only real correlation you see in America is the rate of abortion is directly correlated to the number of abortion factories. So in a state like Texas or Florida, these are, pretty red states, and Democrats will try to say all the time that red states have a higher abortion rate, which isn't entirely true, because hardcore blue states like California, and I also believe Maryland is also on this list, and Maryland has 21 abortion factories, which is the same amount as the state of Florida. And the state of Florida has a lot more people. But I digress. So you have some major blue states that don't report their abortion rates. But other than that, the correlation seems to be the number of abortion factories in a state is directly correlated to the rate of abortion. So a state like Missouri that has now 0 abortion factories in operation has one of the lowest abortion rates in the country. And I believe another state was either North or South Dakota. I think it was South Dakota that also only has 1 abortion factory. So the states that only have 1 abortion factory have a considerably lower abortion rate than the state of Texas, which has about 25, give or take, and the state of Florida, which has about 21, give or take. So that is the most important factor in determining the rate of abortion. It's not blue state versus red state. It's the number of abortion factories. So for Rebecca McLaughlin to argue that it's social inequality that drives abortion, no, it's not. It's Planned Parenthood was specifically designed to target black people, so it specifically targets black people. And these tiny black lives matter, but rather than providing women with the support they need, our society opts for the quick fix of abortion. So let's have a serious conversation about race, as the Gospel Coalition likes to say oftentimes. Let's have a serious conversation about race. Black culture is extremely matriarchal. And black women are pretty ruthless about getting abortions. That's just what I've heard from several black men out there. And that's scary. If you want to date a conservative Christian black woman as a black man, you are on a unicorn hunt. That's just the way it is. And that's unfortunate, but I'm spitting statistical facts here. So matriarchy does not lower abortion rates. In fact, I would actually argue the opposite. It would probably increase abortion rates. We need some good old-fashioned patriarchy and some criminalization to curb abortion. That's the real solution. Thankfully, abortion rates in America are trending down. 2018 saw the lowest rate on record, but still represents 619,591 lost lives. I'm not exactly sure how true that is, because I believe a lot of this data either comes from the CDC or the Guttmacher Institute, which is a pro-abortion advocacy firm. And I don't believe they count every abortion. So, obviously, if it's a surgical abortion, that's counted. But if someone's prescribed pills, that's not necessarily counted, I don't think. So there are some gaps in our data and reporting on the issue of abortion. So I think that has more to do with the trending down, but it also is the laws. The laws work. When the Texas abortion law went into effect, the abortion rate in that state got slashed. It got slashed hardcore. So that's the good news. So Rebecca McLaughlin ends the article by making an argument about the birth rate and how we need more kids. And that's true, but that's not the argument to make in an abortion article. I don't think it is. Unless you want to make a common, hey, killing off your future population is bad for the, which she does. That is the argument she makes, but it doesn't really fit in this. I don't think it fits in this article. And contrary to popular imagination, the vast majority of abortions do not arise from teenage pregnancies, but are sought by women who, with right support, could be in good position to raise these children. Again, I don't really know how true that is, because that is a subjective call. I do think it's mostly hookup culture that's driving this, not necessarily teen pregnancies. But the goal of Planned Parenthood is to groom women into getting abortions so that they have 3 by the time that they're 30. That is the goal of Planned Parenthood. They want women to be repeat customers. So when the pro-abortion crowd touts the stat that 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 women have had abortions, that's really based on the number of abortions versus the number of women of childbearing age. And when you do that math, it seems disproportionately high. But the reality is, people are getting their abortion punch card and, the 10th abortion's free on the house and maybe comes with a free sandwich. That's basically that's how this industry operates. They want repeat customers. And so you basically would have people that are repeat customers driving the abortion stats. And, also there's some Moloch worship. We cannot ignore the spiritual implicities of the abortion industry. There is a Molech worshiping component to it. That's why they don't want to give it up. The Bible doesn't call us to a pseudo-Christian past when the West was supposedly controlled by Christian norms, but men were all too often excused to sleep with prostitutes and servant girls, and pregnant women were abandoned by the thousands. It doesn't call us to a world which unmarried mothers are despised or marginalized and forced into backstreet abortions. Again, how common were backstreet abortions? How common was that? And even if it happened, again, it should be illegal and criminalized. Rather, God calls us to a world in which women are seen as equal to men, regardless of their marital status, in which pregnant women are supported, in which men are called to either be faithful husbands or faithful singles, and in which babies are valued and provided for not just by their biological parents, but by their spiritual family writ large. Okay, first of all, the children of pagans are not in our spiritual family. Not directly or not by virtue of being born. So this is a very incorrect assumption. Again, pagans aren't in our spiritual family as believers. This is kind of a nonsensical point. It's a very emotional point, but it's illogical and theologically unsound. So she's going off that in order to make a final point. To solve the problem of abortion, we don't just need one law reversed. We need a loving revolution. And the truth is, we need to actually criminalize abortion. If we want a real revolution, we need to make the law reflect God's law. The law on earth needs to reflect God's law, especially on this issue. They used to execute people for infanticide. They used to execute mothers for infanticide back in the day in like medieval Europe and stuff. Again, that's a death penalty offense. That's first-degree murder. To do abortion, that is a first-degree murder. Or as the Bible would call it, murder with hatred. So it's clear, and yes, I would argue that changing the law would have a major cultural consequence. If we change the law, that'll change the culture, because there is a feedback loop between the law and the culture. There's a feedback loop between politics and culture. It's not just culture affects politics, and we also see that politics affects culture. We see that in 2015 when the Supreme Court overruled the Constitution on the states' rights to regulate marriage, which is, Article 1, Section 10, I believe, is the states have the right to regulate marriage, but the Supreme Court struck that from the Constitution thanks to Catholic Anthony Kennedy. That had a major effect on our culture. That terraformed our culture. All this cancel culture stuff, all this weakness in, Mike Pence, and that level of lacking of testicular fortitude started in 2015. The whole transgenderism flying out of the floodgates happened in 2015. That's when that started. All of that started in 2015. So here we are. Now, if we have a major win against abortion, if we are able to outlaw abortion in the United States, we will see a major right-wing shift in our country and national politics, and that will be glorious. That will be glorious. And again, not to discredit God here, because how many people have been praying for an end to abortion in the United States? How many people have been praying for that? If abortion ends in the United States, God deserves all the credit for that. Not any Supreme Court justices or any other politicians, because Supreme Court justices are politicians, but the credit goes to God. Because we would have been able to push back on something that no one else in the world has. Like, countries have abolished abortion, and they did that early, but how many countries have gone from being the leading exporter of abortion worldwide to crippling the abortion industry? Like, that would be such an incredible feat, and I look forward to seeing that day realized. So I want the day where it is a death penalty offense to get abortion. That's the day I want to see in America, and that's what we should keep fighting for. Not giving welfare for pregnant women, which, by the way, already exists. I work in healthcare IT, so I can tell you that pregnant women getting Medicaid or CHIP is relatively easy if they're at or below the poverty level. They basically would have their pregnancy cared for. They would have the health care of their child cared for. And, as a parent caretaker or as a pregnant woman, they would likely have their child care or their health care parts dealt with. And not to mention, we already have a ridiculous welfare system in this country. It is ridiculous to suggest that we need to add more social safety nets for pregnant women. I don't think that's true. Not from a governmental standpoint. I think we already have enough, and people don't want to raise their children. They don't want to accept responsibility, and we cannot change that, because that is an issue in people's hearts, that they don't want to accept responsibility when the abortion factor is right down the street from them. That's the major issue in this country. Rebecca McLaughlin sucks at being pro-life, and her writing that Constantine the Great was a Christian is asinine and historically inaccurate at best. And she uses that to make all these false assumptions about precedent in church history, or in fighting infanticide in church history. So that's all I got to say about that. My name is Ray. This is the Evangelical Dark Web. If you like this kind of content, subscribe to the channel. And if you really like this kind of content, support Evangelical Dark Web at evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. And you can become a subscriber via our Patreon-like system over there. Let me know what you think about what I think, and I will catch you on the next one.